Monad is a technology project that's introducing new software technologies, the key to delivering more performance while still keeping the same level of decentralization. A performant, decentralized network that can process over 10,000 transactions per second of throughput.
This material is for informational purposes only and is not intended to provide accounting, legal, or tax advice, or investment recommendations, or an official statement of Presto or its affiliates.
Hi, everyone. This is Presto Research Podcast. My name is Peter Chung, head of research at the Presto, and also a host of today's episode. I'm joined today by my colleague, Rick, and also a very special guest, the co-founder of Monad Labs, Keone Hon. Hi, Keone. How are you?
Hey, doing well. Good. Nice to be here.
Good. Now, we have a lot to talk about, given that there has been actually so much happening with the Monad recently, especially after the very successful testnet launch a couple months ago, and also, a lot of interest in your project. Now, before we start, actually, full disclosure, Presto is an investor in Monad. But we'll try to be as neutral as possible in this conversation. And so what I wanted to maybe start off with you, Keone, is, as I would do with the most people that come onto our podcast as a guest, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and how you ended up in the crypto industry and at Monad?
Sure thing. Great to be here. My name's Keone. Prior to starting Monad, I've worked as a quant in the high-frequency trading space for about 10 years, mostly on the non-crypto side, trading traditional markets, futures, equities, government bonds. And high-frequency trading is really interesting industry because it's very data-driven. You have a ton of data. There's millions of data points every day with sort of an infinite number of columns, which are different signals that you might be measuring in the market. And the job is to distill all of that data into actionable predictions and make those predictions really quickly. So it ended up meaning building a really performant system, as well as utilizing a lot of machine learning techniques in a relatively cutting edge way. So spent about 10 years doing that, and then joined the crypto team at Jump Trading, where I'd been working at for the previous 7 years, and spent a little over 6 months in the crypto team, focusing on Solana DeFi. And while I was there, I came to learn a lot about state of the world in Solana in 2021, observed a lot of inefficiencies in how Solana was built, but actually observed even more inefficiencies in how Ethereum and the EVM were built. And it was just very clear that there's a need for much more performant EVM. So I ended up leaving Jump and along with two other co-founders started Monad Labs in early 2022 with the mission of making the EVM much more performant, which involved a lot of different technology innovations or architectural changes across the stack that ultimately ended up becoming Monad.
Sounds great.
Okay. In case our viewers haven't seen your previous 500 interviews, could you please introduce Monad and tell us what differentiates you guys from competitors? Sure.
Monad is a reimagining of the EVM and Ethereum from scratch. So Monad is a completely new piece of software. It's not a fork. Everything is built anew in C++ and Rust. And Monad is a new blockchain that introduces several new architectural changes to make a blockchain really efficient while staying extremely decentralized as well. So in particular, Monad features, and I'll just mention a couple of different improvements, the different layers of the stack. But Monad features a new database for storing Ethereum Merkle tree data really efficiently on disk. Monad features parallel execution for executing many transactions in parallel and utilizing the high performance of the database underneath. Monad also introduces asynchronous execution, where consensus and execution are moved into two separate swim lanes, which maximizes the throughput of the system by raising the time budget for execution substantially. Additionally, Monad introduces two other improvements called Monad BFT and RaptorCast. Monad BFT is a new Byzantine fault-tolerant consensus mechanism that keeps hundreds of nodes in sync with each other while staying fully globally decentralized. So it's a new way of these nodes communicating with each other and coming to consensus on the official ordering of transaction and the official blocks. And then lastly, Monad introduces RaptorCast, which is a new mechanism for propagating blocks from a leader node to all of the other nodes in the system. And one thing to know about RaptorCast is that it's a way of propagating really big blocks because in Monad, blocks have a lot of transactions and they're physically just quite big, while still having very reasonable bandwidth requirements for each of those nodes when they become the leader. So overall, when you kind of stack all of these improvements together, we end up getting significant performance improvements. You could think of the stacking of these different improvements as like stacking coupons. If you stack a 50% discount with the 75% discount with the 40% discount all together, you get a massive discount when those coupons stack. So kind of same concept here. By making several improvements that all stack on top of each other, we end up with a performant decentralized network that can process over 10,000 transactions per second of throughput, aka over a billion gas per second. Gas is a sort of a unit of computational complexity in blockchain. And that means that we could support hundreds of millions of users all using the blockchain on a daily basis, whereas right now, for example, for Ethereum, the number of users per day is literally limited to 1 million users per day because there's only 1 million transactions per day in Ethereum, whereas Monad is 1 billion transactions.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you know how in crypto people often talk about the blockchain trilemma. So if you are kind of stuck with that frame of thinking, some people think that the fact that you can scale so much may mean that maybe you're compromising on decentralization part. You think that frame of thinking is misguided? And what's your thoughts on that blockchain trilemma kind of issue? Is that still relevant way of looking at things?
At the end of the day, technology is always about enabling either new usages or more efficient usages with the same cost. Monad is a technology project that's introducing new software technologies to deliver the best of all worlds for users and developers. And these software improvements that we've introduced are the key to delivering more performance while still keeping the same level of decentralization. So where other projects in the past might have, in some cases, utilized, reduce the amount of decentralization in order to get higher performance, for example, by utilizing really beefy hardware, something like that. With Monad, the whole purpose is maintain a high degree of decentralization and maintain that high degree of decentralization, both in terms of the number of nodes that can be supported in the network. At the present moment in the testnet, 99, but I think by the time of mainnet, well over 150 or 200. So maintaining a high number of nodes in the network and then also making each of those nodes really cheap to run. These are attributes that allow the network to be decentralized by allowing anyone to be able to participate. And we get that through technology. So you're right that it's not easy to accomplish this. And, in the past, maybe some of the ways to do that would have been relying on high amounts of hardware. But with software improvements, with software architecture improvements, that's the entire goal, is to get more performance while staying highly decentralized.
Okay, so we just talked about your great tech that allows for hundreds of millions of users and billions of transactions, and also whilst maintaining a high degree of decentralization, as you just mentioned. We talked about a bit on Monad BFT and Raptorcast, but obviously that's only like one half of the um, success strategy, like a barbell strategy for a chain, and the other one is probably the community building side. Because without a community, a great chain is still a ghost chain. So, and I think being on CT and looking at past like Monad Madnesses, it's pretty fair to say Monad has reached quite a high level of success in this regard. So I was wondering if you had any advice for founders and teams who are striving to build out a strong community base.
Yeah, I think it starts from understanding the users and being very crypto native, like following along with the culture and understanding, a lot of lore and understanding a lot of things that have been tried before, whether those are applications or initiatives or DAOs. And then I think it's just about making a real effort to deliver value for users. I know, and the recent discourse on Twitter has been all about um, revenue generating apps and revenue generating blockchains, which makes total sense because in the startup world, in non-crypto, ARR, annual recurring revenue, is the most important metric. That's the North Star for any startup. And I guess in the past, in crypto, sometimes we have lost sight of that and focus more on like narratives or hype or whatever. But at the end of the day, revenue is the best sign that users are getting value out of the product and that you're building something for users. So that's, with the product live and mature and getting that user feedback. But in the time before that, I would say it's still understanding what users care about and trying to deliver as much value as possible for them. And so in the early days of growing the Monad community, our team was really thoughtful about how to offer a lot of value to users, even before the mainnet is live. And a lot of that boiled down to creating a space where people can kind of like take refuge from the bear market and make a lot of friendships, get opportunities to take on more leadership in the space, for people that are very creative, giving them an audience for their creativity, for people that spend hours a day on crypto Twitter, giving them a voice and encouraging everyone to, I don't know, just share their opinions and share about themselves and actually shape the direction of the community and the project. So the Monad community is incredibly, incredibly strong. I'm really humbled every day, just thinking about the number of really talented, smart, creative, kind people that are in the Monad community that are giving part of themselves to help make this community something that matters in the long term, something that means something. But it just comes from, I guess, like a degree of shared values and shared long-term values. And then from our team's perspective, just trying to deliver a lot of value to the community in the early days, which is hard to do because in the pre-mainnet phase, there's no monetary value that people can gain from being in the community. There's no but there's still like a ton of value in relationships and friendships and opportunities for growth, opportunities for leadership, and so on. And I think the community has really embodied that and really made it into something incredible.
It's interesting you mentioned like being crypto native and understanding like the law and making effort also, because I had a personal non-prepared question. Your interactions with Cat CL, was that part of like an intentional effort, like you mentioned, in the community building? Because that came at a pretty good time too, with someone else not wanting to pay for his Twitter premium and stuff. So, and I think that was my first impression of Monad, like an early impression of Monad not being like super serious only, like having that other side of like, oh, they must get it, they understand, and they're not just like X really smart TradFi quants, but they understand what's important, what like we on Twitter care about. Was that intentional?
No, it wasn't intentional. I mean, I think at the end of the day, when you spend a lot of time on crypto Twitter, then as I was saying, like, the lore, the characters, it's okay to not be serious. And I think it's just about like having that knowledge then it gives confidence to like take some risk, like to say, okay, well, we can joke around here, we can have a good time. But yeah, I don't know. It's there's also an element of speed, like when you um if it takes you a long time to like sit down and think about, okay, is this really strategically like the optimal thing for the project to do, blah blah blah, you might actually lose the fleeting moment to participate in the jokes. So yeah, I don't
Yeah.
I think
This will
it's just
happen to someone else.
yeah, I think
Situation.
it's just common sense
Yeah.
and instinct. But yeah, the crypto Twitter is it's good that people are self-deprecating, don't take themselves too seriously. If they do, then other people will kind of knock them down a peg or two, and that allows us to collectively, as participants in this space, to become friends and to yeah, just like see things for how they are.
Yeah. So I guess maybe the key is to understand the law, be early in decisions, and be generous with small costs as well. Um, so next question, I mentioned Monad Madness very briefly in my previous question. But I'm curious if there have been any pitches that have stood out to you that make use of the tech and what makes Monad very high performance.
There are so many really promising early stage projects building in the Monad ecosystem right now. I guess at the risk of calling a couple specific ones out, but just to give some examples, Opinion Labs is building next generation prediction markets on Monad. They're very principled about how they establish markets and how they define the market resolution criteria, which is really important because in prediction markets, you run into edge cases more frequently than you would expect. Like, did if the prediction market is about Donald Trump doing something like before a certain date and time, then does it count if he says he's going to do it in the speech or says that it's done even though it isn't really done? Like, there are all these little corner cases, and so the curation of these markets and the really precise resolution mechanism, I think, is one thing that sets this team apart, as well as just killer execution and a really easy to use front end. Kuru is building exchanges on chain, utilizing the power of Monad's throughput to process a huge number of transactions every block, every half second, every second. This is really important because right now, when you trade on an AMM, it's very common to experience a large amount of slippage, and that slippage is coming from the fact that liquidity is often spread quite sporadically across the entire range of prices. And although you could have concentrated liquidity, that requires that concentrated position to get updated very frequently to stay very close to fair value, which doesn't really happen in practice. Order books allow really efficient quoting of assets and help bring the level of efficiency from a slippage perspective that we see in traditional finance to DeFi. And then by building this on Monad in a shared global state, it means that any other application that routes orders through Kuru, through this order book, can use the atomic composability that exists within shared global state. So they can call that that trade or swap function as a subroutine of a larger smart contract interaction and atomically swap through while proceeding with other instructions as well. So I think those are just a couple of examples of specific applications that are building in Monad, but there's so many talented teams that are just very ambitious and working really hard to build early stage startups and are on the grind because it is very challenging to build an early stage startup. I think that's something that we sometimes gloss over in the crypto space is like, yeah, it to go from 0 to 1 and then from 1 to 100 is a massive undertaking. And there's just amazing teams that are building here.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And I guess all of that activities are translating into quite a high level of the transactions per day already. I think last time I checked, maybe a couple of months ago, was like 15 million transactions per day. Is that I mean, as we move further into the year, do you expect that number to be at a much higher level, or do you have any kind of expectations on how far that number can go?
Mm-hmm. Great question. The Monad technology is stacking all these technological improvements to deliver really high TPS capacity of over 10,000 transactions per second or a billion transactions per day. And the reason why you put all this effort into making the system have really high capacity is so that we can support many users. We can support a single app that gets to 100 million DAU with, say, 10 transactions per user per day, which would then be, what did I say, 10 million DAU times 10 transactions per user per day, which would be 100 million transactions per day. Right now, Ethereum is about 1 million transactions per day, while Monad can support 1 billion per day. So if you want to build an app that really gets to that high level of adoption, then just by definition, it's going to need much higher throughput than what we have right now in crypto systems. And right now in the testnet, we've seen a sort of steady state average of about 200 transactions per second, which translates to about 20 million transactions per day. And that's already a pretty crazy number because it's already 20x the usage of Monad on testnet is already 20x the capacity of Ethereum. But that's also still like a small drop in the bucket relative to the capacity that exists on Monad right now. So yeah, I think that it's kind of up only from here. At the same time, the current testnet usage it's there to demonstrate the capacity of what's possible. And so we've run a lot of more transient load tests where we push the system to between 5 and 10,000 transactions per second.
Maybe I want to switch a gear a little bit and then talk about maybe more broadly about like where the industry is going and how kind of Monad is kind of positions relative to that, and more specifically, if you look at the history of the past L1 projects, there has been many L1 projects that were once touted for their network performance or very large fundraising, but they have gradually kind of phased into obscurity. And so I'm just wondering, do these failures in the past offer any lessons for Monad in terms of how you can sustain the current very strong momentum for many years to come? Or have they shaped Monad's growth strategy in any way?
Yeah, it starts with not taking success for granted. The value in a decentralized network with shared global state is really, I mean, it's in the name. It's the network effects. It is getting tens to hundreds of millions of people all keeping their assets on chain, all keeping their data on chain, like all integrating their wallet with the network and logging in and using applications. So we don't take it for granted. There's a ton of effort that's going into supporting early stage builders and having a really thriving entrepreneurial ecosystem so that there are great applications that deliver a lot of value to users who are using this network that are keeping assets on chain, that are keeping their data on chain in this one shared global state. But yeah, I think that at the same time, there's also, like, at the end of the day, our team is really long-term oriented. We're building for a future where we can have a decentralized network that is the underpinning for a lot of global financial activity and a lot of global commerce. And we see the huge opportunity in basically unsiloing many silos that exist right now. So when you think about how global finance works right now, you have a bunch of different separate silos, which are separate banks or separate payment networks or what have you, that each have their own, basically giant database with a whole bunch of customer accounts and balances. And if you do a transfer within the bank, then that decrements one account and increments another one. And if you want to transfer from one bank to another bank, then it there's a transfer between these two banks, between these two silos. But the silos are separate, and there's huge inefficiency that comes from the fact that these silos are separate, probably even in different countries altogether, which then involves like some sort of cross-border payments, often routing through an intermediary bank. It's a really complicated system with a lot of inefficiencies. And we can push all this down to a more connected, performant base layer that's neutral. And it's neutral, meaning that it's decentralized, that it's not just owned by one party or controlled by one party, but actually through technology has the control federated across a huge number of validators. Then there's actually a huge opportunity to unlock an incredible amount of value for end users. And those end users are, people that are, their families and they're working in a different country from where their family is, and they're sending money back all the time. Or they're a contractor that is in another country that is working for a country in the US that's receiving payments, and like they can receive USDC instead of receiving like some really complicated like cross-border payment. Like there's huge opportunities from unlocking all this value, saving fees and making payments across these systems much more efficient. And our team recognizes the value of this and the opportunity and the incredible amount of value for end users that can get unlocked. But it's a long-term effort to build for this and to enable this. And I would say that at least with some projects in the past, maybe they didn't have as much of a long-term vision or long-term orientation. So I just think that the best way to vaccinate yourself, to protect yourself from a slow death, is having a long-term vision and really working toward that vision.
Right. Yeah. I think a lot of what you just described now is sort of the kind of the areas that many other L1 projects were also kind of hoping to go after. But I guess so far no one's really been that successful. But you think the lack of ability to scale was a big part of many of other projects not being able to maybe achieve all these potentials from the areas that you just mentioned? Was it a big part of the problem, you think?
I think the combination of really high performance EVM compatibility and decentralization are actually a much rarer combination than it might seem. EVM is really the dominant standard for smart contract programming. It has, I believe, over 90% of all capital on chain is in EVM smart contracts. There's so many libraries, there's so many existing programs, there's a lot of really great tooling all built around the EVM ecosystem. But the EVM itself is still very inefficient. So Monad is doing something unique in rebuilding the EVM from scratch, introducing parallel execution, introducing a new database that's optimized for the format of storage that Ethereum and EVM is stored in. And these are completely new technologies that really unlock much higher performance for the EVM. I guess for reference, right now, the most performant rollup, which is, a single sequencer, so not even really decentralized. The most performant rollup right now is Base, and it's processing about, I believe, 100 transactions per second, which ends up being about 10 million transactions per day. So it's still, compared to the global scale of what would be needed to support, a fully global set of users, we're still not there yet. And Monad is really introducing those technology puzzle pieces that are needed to push from 10 million transactions per day to a billion transactions per day.
Yeah, got it. Also, another thing that I kind of wanted to ask you about was the tokenomics, because I guess, I know you were able to build very successful community, and also, the network without the financial incentives. But I'm thinking maybe sometime down the road, the issuing token will be one of the options that you will consider. But I think in the recent days, there has been a lot of discussions about how maybe not very desirable tokenomics have caused some in a lot of I guess noises and losses for some investors. And I think there's been a lot of discussions about what's the best kind of tokenomics design, and also what are the best ways to distribute your tokens into the hands of the right people. Have you given much thoughts about that at all? And if so, can you share some of that thoughts with us?
I think maybe one thing to mention is that the point of the token in a layer one system is to pay for computation. The purpose of the layer one network itself is it's a world computer. It's shared global state where anyone can submit work. Anyone can call a smart contract, and that costs resources because the entire global network is doing this computation in parallel on all the nodes, and the user needs to pay for that in order to make those resources not be abused. And so the gas token is there to pay for those resources. And in some senses, the token supply is really like the supply of all of the computational resources of the network over a long period of time. In recent days, there's been, I guess, discussions about revenue generation of blockchains and people wanting tokens that are valuable, that have revenue. And I think, the layer one token model where there's a gas token that's paying for computation, portion gets burned. That is one of the more robust mechanisms for token value in the space. So that's the good news. And then I think in addition, you were asking about the distribution and how we think about things at a high level. It's really important that the stakeholders in the new network, that it's highly distributed, that people that have contributed a lot to the growth and success of the network getting up to now, which definitely includes the Monad community, are significant stakeholders in the network's token as well. And I think that's really important because we need decentralization. We need true distributed ownership of the network and control of the network, so that we can realize this vision of a distributed network that's not just controlled by one entity. So we're thinking a lot about how to do this in the most robust way that's robust to Sybil attackers, and we'll have more to share in the coming months. But it's a huge effort to get this right, and we only get one opportunity to do it right. But making sure that the community is a stakeholder, a huge stakeholder in the network, is really important. I think lastly, I would just say that Yeah, like, there have been some projects that have really caused a lot of damage in trust, due to being very short-term oriented. And I think that it's very short-sighted, easy to say in retrospect, but you have to have a long-term vision, for building in the space, and have to realize that, there's so much to do, and the genesis of a network and, the launch of a new token is not the end game. It's really just the starting line. So for me, I've been working on Monad for over 3 years now, but it feels like a very short amount of time. The previous job, I've worked at for 8 years in the crypto space. Like, that 8 years sounds insane, but it's really very, very normal. Like, you should, if you care about something, you should devote, a lot of time to it, and devote that time to becoming an expert and to making a real impact. And I feel like the period of time up to now is still just the very, very start. So I think the other point I want to make is just that, I'm here for the long term. There's so much to do. When the network goes live, there's still going to be very limited adoption relative to what I want to ultimately see. And so anything that's related to the short-term optimization of the network or the token is not interesting to me. I care about the long term. And I just think that I think people should feel reassured that that's how our team thinks about things, because that's the way to build something for long-term success.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And the one thing I noticed, I mean, before this show, I've seen many of your other appearances, other podcasts, and then I think you often make a reference to these popular apps, top 20 apps on iOS. So that kind of game led me to think that you're actually thinking a very long game, because I have not seen many founders actually making that comparison. Obviously, your benchmark is the popular, like, centralized apps, and you see the potential there. So, like, in terms of the future usage growth. So I mean, it's good to hear that you have such a long-term mindset on the future of your project. And then I guess we're almost coming to an end of the conversation. So just want to maybe ask you the last question, which is kind of more broadly on the crypto industry in general. After the election last year, now you have this very crypto friendly administration, and I think we've been under this regime for about only 5 months now. But like, over that period of time, do you see any changes in the builder's mindset or attitude now that we have this like more crypto friendly environment in the US? And if you notice any interesting trends that have emerged this year versus last year among the the builders, what would that be?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I do feel like there's, so if I think about since President Trump entered office, like, some of the legislative or executive changes that have put in place, I think there's been some advances on the stablecoin front. There's definitely work in progress toward more clear governance of crypto assets, which is very exciting. And I think on the builder side, this is a sweeping generalization, but it feels like there's less sort of existential questioning of, like, is crypto going to be an accepted industry? Like, am I building in a space that is going to exist in 5 years? Which for me has never been in doubt, but it's also understandable that, given the previous administration's very anti-crypto stance, that now the current regime is much more of a breath of fresh air and people are a lot more optimistic. That said, I think there's still a lot more clarity that's needed in order for us to know from a tactical or specific structuring related, jurisdictional related perspective, like how to proceed. And I think that further clarity will be a big unlock for builders. But yeah, for right now, I think there's less doubt that the administration, that the change is coming in a positive direction. But then there's still like the bigger problem of like, okay, I'm an early stage startup. How do I get to product market fit? How do I get to a state where I have like a lot of users that are that are sustaining the application through their usage? And how do I break out of the crypto bubble? How do I get mainstream adoption? How do I stand out from the pack? How do I hire? How do I scale the team? How do I prioritize my time? How do I ship really fast? And I think those are it's hard. Like starting a startup is super hard. And I think that's probably like the main thing that's on people's minds. And that's part of my job, is to help people accelerate their growth and have the right strategy and posture and mindset.
Great. Yeah. I think we're still early stages, I guess, when you think about it. I mean, I think we're so used to things happening so quickly in crypto, but when you actually, zoom out and look at the world and the things that needs to happen at the government level, I mean, these are the things that really requires a lot more time. So maybe we should be patient and then hope that we get some good development on the crypto space. Well, I think we covered a lot of things, and thanks a lot for your time, Keone. It's all in the morning at your time, but thanks for getting up and joining our conversation. I think we're gonna wrap here, and if anybody, I think there may be some people. I mean, I think you're already well-known project, but in case that people still wants to learn more about you, what are the good resources they can refer to?
Yeah, they can check out www.monad.xyz. So that's monad.xyz. Or they can check us out on Twitter, where we're monad_xyz.
All right. Sounds good. Okay. Once again, thanks a lot, Keone.
Yeah.
We'll wrap it here.
Thanks, Rick. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye.